Nostradamus' shocking prediction: these 3 zodiac signs will be millionaires after January 25, 2025. Hello everyone, and welcome to Zen Buddhism Wisdom, your sanctuary for uncovering deep truths about karma, destiny, and the path to true prosperity. Throughout history, great minds have sought to understand the forces shaping human fate. Among them, Nostradamus remains one of the most mysterious figures, with his cryptic prophecies seemingly predicting world-altering events. But is destiny truly set in stone? Or do we hold the power to reshape our future? Buddhism teaches that the mind creates reality. Wealth, success, and opportunity are not predetermined by the stars alone, they are shaped by karma, effort, and wisdom. While celestial alignments may open doors, only those who act with awareness can walk through them. In today's video, we'll explore Nostradamus' intriguing predictions, the powerful astrological shifts unfolding after March 20, 2025, and, most importantly, how you can apply Zen Buddhist wisdom to turn cosmic opportunities into real, lasting prosperity. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Zen Buddhism Wisdom, and turn on notifications so you never miss powerful insights on spiritual wealth and mindful success. Now, are you ready to unlock the deeper truths of fate, fortune, and financial transformation? Let's dive in. Nostradamus, born Michel de Nostradame in 1503, was not just a prophet, he was a visionary whose cryptic quatrains have mystified scholars and seekers of truth for centuries. A physician, astrologer, and scholar, he lived in an era of upheaval, yet his writings seemed to transcend time, predicting world-shaking events long before they occurred. From the rise and fall of great empires to economic crises and even technological revolutions, his insights have sparked both awe and controversy. But were his predictions glimpses of an unchangeable future, or did he simply perceive the karmic currents shaping human destiny? In Buddhism, the future is not a rigid path carved in stone but a river shaped by countless streams of cause and effect. Every event unfolds through pratyaya samutpada, the law of dependent origination, where past actions, karma, create the conditions for future outcomes. A masterful observer like Nostradamus may not have been foretelling fate, but rather recognizing the seeds already sown, the karmic imprints ripening at specific moments in time. Yet, Zen wisdom teaches us that prophecy is not predestination. Even if the stars align in a certain way, even if karmic forces appear to favor one path, human willpower remains the ultimate variable. A farmer can foresee the coming harvest by studying the land, but the final yield still depends on how the crops are nurtured. In the same way, the wealth and success that Nostradamus foresaw for certain zodiac signs after March 20, 2025, are not guarantees, they are invitations. The question is not whether fortune will arrive, but whether we will be prepared to receive it. Through wisdom, mindfulness, and decisive action, we can transform opportunities into tangible prosperity. Those who understand this will not passively wait for destiny to unfold, they will shape it with their own hands. So the real question is, when the doors of abundance open, will you step through? 1. Aries, March 21 to April 19, the trailblazer of success. Aries is the fire that ignites revolutions, the leader who charges ahead before others even recognize the opportunity. Born under the rule of Mars, the planet of war, ambition, and action, Aries is wired to dominate. And after March 20, 2025, the universe is setting the stage for Aries to rewrite their financial destiny. History has shown that Aries' relentless drive and risk-taking nature have been the key to extraordinary success. Leonardo da Vinci, an Aries visionary, revolutionized art and science with his groundbreaking inventions. Steve Jobs, another Aries, defied the norms of the tech industry, reshaping the way we live with Apple's innovations. Aries is a sign that doesn't wait for permission, it creates its own empire. Why will Aries become a millionaire after March 20th, 2025? The answer lies in three key factors: talent, opportunity, and cosmic alignment. Aries isn't just ambitious, it's relentless. This sign is known for taking risks that others shy away from, making them natural-born entrepreneurs, investors, and industry disruptors. Where others hesitate, Aries leaps. Their ability to thrive under pressure and make bold decisions will place them ahead of the competition in 2025 and beyond. Aries is about to enter one of the most financially favorable planetary transits in decades. With Jupiter, the planet of expansion and prosperity, aligning with Mars in Aries' financial house. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to capitalize on new ventures, high-risk investments, and groundbreaking ideas. Think of this as the gold rush moment for Aries. If you've been contemplating launching a business, investing in a high-stakes project, or taking a major career leap, this is the moment the universe gives you an unfair advantage. When Jupiter and Mars align, massive success follows those who are bold enough to act. Historically, such alignments have marked turning points in economic booms, technological breakthroughs, and the rise of self-made billionaires. In Aries' case, this planetary energy will supercharge their ability to make fearless financial moves with astonishing payoffs. Whether it's seizing a rare business opportunity, negotiating high-stakes deals, or revolutionizing an industry, Aries will feel an unstoppable force driving them toward prosperity. Aries' financial success will explode in fields that require leadership, innovation, and competitive edge. If you're an Aries, here's where your millionaire potential will shine brightest: entrepreneurship and startups. Where Aries excels at launching bold, disruptive businesses and redefining markets, finance and investments, where Aries' risk-taking nature makes them exceptional in high-stakes investing, cryptocurrency, stock trading, and venture capital, entertainment and digital influence, where Aries' natural charisma and confidence make them unstoppable in media, YouTube, personal branding, and entertainment, and tech and innovation, where some of the biggest tech giants in history had Aries-like energy. If you've been thinking about launching a cutting-edge AI startup, a breakthrough app, or a revolutionary product, 2025 is your moment. While Aries is set to conquer the financial world, true wealth isn't just about money, it's about inner balance. Zen Buddhism teaches that power without mindfulness leads to self-destruction. Here's how Aries can master wealth without being consumed by it. Pause before you leap, because Aries' biggest strength is also its biggest weakness: acting before thinking. In Zen, mindfulness means making decisions from a place of clarity, not impulse. Before making a big financial move, take a step back, meditate, and ask yourself, am I chasing this for ego or true purpose? Detach from the outcome, because Zen teaches that attachment leads to suffering. Success is not in the money itself, but in the mastery of wealth. If Aries learns to detach from material obsession, they will gain something even greater: freedom. Transform ego into purpose, because Aries' natural confidence can sometimes turn into arrogance. But the truly wealthy serve a greater cause. The wealthiest, most fulfilled people in history weren't just rich, they created impact. Turn your ambition into something that serves others, and your fortune will never fade. 2025 is not just another year for Aries, it is a financial awakening. With cosmic forces in your favor, the only thing standing between you and millionaire status is your own hesitation. Will you take the leap? Will you seize the opportunities that align with your highest potential? The fire of Aries was never meant to burn quietly, it was meant to set the world ablaze. Your millionaire journey starts now. 2. Leo, July 23 to August 22, glowing star, the king of prosperity. Leo is not just a star, they are the sun itself, radiant, magnetic, and destined to shine. Ruled by the sun, the center of the solar system, Leo possesses an innate ability to draw people, opportunities, and wealth toward them. Throughout history, those born under this sign have ascended to power, not through brute force, but through sheer presence, influence, and unshakable confidence. Think of Barack Obama, whose Leo charisma captivated a nation. Think of Jennifer Lopez, who turned her talent into an empire spanning music, film, and fashion. These are not just individuals, they are forces of nature, just like every Leo destined to rise after March 20th. 2025, what makes Leo a financial powerhouse in 2025 and beyond? 3 undeniable forces: their talent, the opportunities that come their way, and cosmic alignment working in their favor. Leo's talent lies in their ability to command attention and inspire action. They are natural-born leaders, performers, and visionaries. Unlike Aries, who fights for dominance, Leo effortlessly attracts it. They walk into a room, and people take notice. This magnetic presence makes them unstoppable in industries where influence equals income. The opportunities arriving for Leo after March 20th, 2025, are not ordinary, they are game-changing. The Sun, their ruling celestial body, will align with Venus in a rare cosmic event, amplifying Leo's ability to generate wealth through personal branding, media influence, and luxury markets. In practical terms, this means high-profile collaborations, viral success in digital platforms, and lucrative investment opportunities in elite industries. If you are a Leo, this is your time to step into the limelight like never before. Fortune favors those who dare to claim it. When we look at history, some of the wealthiest figures have shared Leo-like qualities: confidence, flair, and a talent for showmanship. Take Louis Vuitton, who transformed a simple craft into the most luxurious fashion empire in the world. Or Napoleon Bonaparte, whose leadership wasn't just about war but about redefining an era. Leo thrives in industries where prestige and personal influence are the currency of success. In 2025, expect massive breakthroughs in entertainment and media, where Leo's ability to capture the public's imagination will skyrocket their career in film, television, YouTube, or social influence. The luxury market will also be a goldmine, with Leos excelling in high-end fashion, branding, and premium real estate. Lastly, leadership roles in politics, corporate management, and executive coaching will be highly lucrative for those willing to embrace their natural authority. However, Leo's biggest test on the path to wealth is not external, it is internal. Zen Buddhism teaches that true abundance is not about possession, but about purpose. A lion who roars only to be heard is weak, but a lion who roars with wisdom changes the world. For Leos who want to sustain their financial success, humility is key. Recognize that power is best used when it serves others, not just the self. Detachment is another critical lesson. The measure of true wealth is not how much you own, but how much you are willing to release. When you no longer fear losing, you become unstoppable. March 20th, 2025, is not just a date, it is a threshold. Leo stands on the edge of greatness, with the universe conspiring in their favor. The question is not whether success will come, but whether Leo will rise to meet it with wisdom. The wealth is waiting. Will you claim it? 3. Capricorn, December 22nd to January 19th, Trophy the strategic tycoon. If Aries is the warrior and Leo the ruler, then Capricorn is the architect, the one who builds empires not for fleeting glory, but for legacies that endure. Ruled by Saturn, the planet of discipline, structure, and time, Capricorn understands wealth not as a stroke of luck but as a carefully laid foundation. Their road to financial success is not marked by sudden windfalls but by strategic planning, relentless persistence, and an unmatched ability to navigate long-term investments. After March 20th, 2025, this zodiac powerhouse will step into an era where years of effort, patience, and resilience finally crystallize into tangible financial abundance. What makes Capricorn one of the most financially unstoppable forces in the zodiac? It comes down to three pillars: talent, opportunity, and celestial favor. Capricorn's talent is their methodical approach to success. Unlike risk-taking Aries or spotlight-seeking Leo, Capricorn plays the long game. They don't chase trends, they build institutions. They don't gamble on overnight success, they craft financial blueprints that withstand economic storms. This is the sign that produces CEOs, wealth strategists, and empire builders. Think of Jeff Bezos, whose calculated expansion turned Amazon from an online bookstore into a trillion-dollar global giant. Or J.R.R. Tolkien, who meticulously constructed an entire literary universe that continues to generate massive wealth long after his passing. Capricorn doesn't just create wealth, they engineer dynasties. Opportunities for Capricorn after March 20th, 2025, will be nothing short of transformative. A powerful Saturn transit, combined with Pluto's entry into their financial house, signals a period where their disciplined efforts finally bear fruit. Expect career advancements, lucrative real estate deals, and investments that generate long-term passive income. This is not the time for quick wins, it is the moment to lay the foundation for wealth that lasts generations. The industries most aligned with Capricorn's strengths will be real estate and investment, where their patience and strategic thinking will turn properties into empires. Technology and innovation will also be fertile ground. Especially in AI, engineering, and cutting-edge business solutions that require long-term vision. Executive leadership roles will present golden opportunities for Capricorns ready to take on high-level corporate strategy, wealth management, and Fortune 500 positions. But while Capricorn has the discipline to build great wealth, their greatest challenge is their attachment to control and security. Zen Buddhism teaches that true stability does not come from clinging but from flow. A river that refuses to move becomes stagnant, and the same is true for wealth. Hoarding leads to fear, while strategic generosity creates expansion. Capricorns must learn the art of detachment, not from their ambitions, but from the fear of losing what they have built. Wealth is not about possession, it is about movement, reinvestment, and the ability to let go of what no longer serves them. In the words of Lao Tzu, when I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. For Capricorn, the true test is not in accumulating fortune, but in trusting that their wealth will continue to grow even when they release their grip. March 20th, 2025, marks the beginning of a financial transformation for Capricorns, but whether they reach the peak of their success will depend on one crucial factor: their ability to balance ambition with wisdom, structure with flow, and financial mastery with inner peace. The question is not whether Capricorn will become wealthy. The question is, will they allow themselves to enjoy it? 4. How to maximize this opportunity. Beyond destiny, wealth is not just written in the stars, it is forged through discipline, wisdom, and action. While cosmic forces may align in favor of Aries, Leo, and Capricorn after March 20th, 2025, their success will not manifest out of thin air. In Zen Buddhism, fate is only the seed, growth requires conscious effort. Even the most prosperous astrological transits can be wasted if one does not act with awareness. This is why mastering financial habits, embracing a millionaire mindset, and taking strategic action are the keys to transforming cosmic potential into tangible wealth. The path to financial independence is not a gamble, it is a well-calculated strategy. History has shown that even those born into privilege can lose their fortunes through reckless decisions, while others rise from nothing through smart wealth-building principles. Take Warren Buffett, for example. He didn't amass billions by chasing quick wins but by mastering the art of long-term investing. Aries, Leo, and Capricorn can maximize their wealth potential by making intelligent financial moves. The 50-30-20 rule is a powerful foundation, where 50% of income goes to necessities, 30% to investments like stocks, real estate, or business ventures, and 20% to savings for future security. Wealth is not about how much you earn but how well you manage it. Financial education is another key factor, as the world's richest individuals, from Jeff Bezos to Oprah Winfrey, continuously study investing, asset management, and wealth-building strategies. Aries should study high-risk, high-reward investments, Leo should focus on branding and market trends, and Capricorn must refine their understanding of long-term wealth accumulation. Another crucial step is building multiple income streams. No successful entrepreneur or investor relies on a single source of income. The most financially successful people create multiple revenue streams: business ownership, investments, digital assets, and passive income sources. A modern example is Elon Musk, whose wealth is not just tied to Tesla but extends to SpaceX, Neuralink, and beyond. Wealth is not just a number, it is a way of thinking. Those who truly achieve financial freedom develop habits that set them apart from the average person. Steve Jobs was obsessed with minimalism, believing that removing distractions helped him focus on innovation. Zen Buddhism teaches that simplicity and clarity of mind lead to better decisions, and this wisdom applies directly to financial success. The richest individuals play the long game. While many chase fast money, true millionaires focus on sustainable growth. Capricorn naturally excels at this, but Aries and Leo must learn patience and endurance. Financial freedom is not just about earning more but about spending wisely. Many self-made millionaires, including Mark Zuckerberg, maintain simple lifestyles despite their wealth. Aries should resist impulse spending, Leo should prioritize investments over luxury, and Capricorn should balance security with calculated risk-taking. In Zen Buddhism, wealth is most powerful when shared. Andrew Carnegie, one of history's richest men, donated nearly 90% of his fortune to education and libraries. Generosity creates abundance, both in material and spiritual wealth. The secret to lasting prosperity is not hoarding but circulating wealth wisely, Success is not just about astrological timing, it is about aligning action with opportunity. Aries, Leo, and Capricorn have the cosmic advantage, but only those who apply financial wisdom. Embrace discipline, and cultivate the right mindset will transform their millionaire destiny into reality. The universe may open the door, but stepping through it is up to you. Imagine waking up every day knowing that your financial energy is perfectly aligned with prosperity. No more struggles, no more limitations, just an effortless flow of abundance. Nostradamus may have foreseen wealth for these 3 zodiac signs, but Buddhism teaches that you hold the key to your destiny. Luck is not something we wait for, it is something we create through wisdom, right action, and unwavering determination. Now is the time to step into your power. If you belong to one of these signs, seize the cosmic opportunity ahead, but remember, true wealth is not just about accumulation, it's about wisdom, balance, and purpose. If your sign wasn't mentioned, don't be discouraged. The universe doesn't reward birth dates, it rewards effort. The actions you take today will shape your future prosperity. Which zodiac sign are you? How are you preparing for the opportunities ahead? Share your thoughts in the comments. We're building a mindful wealth community, and we want you to be a part of it. Like this video, subscribe to Zen Buddhism Wisdom, and turn on notifications so you never miss life-changing insights on Buddhist wisdom and abundance. Your wealth is a reflection of your energy. Make it shine.